Hi everybody, this video is a tutorial for how to make the Tyrant for your Dungeons & Dragons games. This project was my entry for the Tabletop Crafters Guild competition for April. Now I didn't make top 5, but I was mentioned in the top 10 video by Jeremy of Black Magic Craft, of course. In the video he mentioned how he thought that I used heat as a means to melt the foam, which is right. Now in the past I've already used spray paint as a means to texture the foam, and there is of course also nail polish remover, which I haven't used yet. That's going to be used in a future project here on Dark Matter Workshop. Jeremy also mentioned how he liked using a materials flaw as an advantage to make something interesting. I agree. In fact, I think that beaded styrofoam gets a little bit of a bad rep when it comes as a material to use in scenery and in terrain pieces, which I find a little bit wrong. We hit 500 subs this week, which is fantastic. I'd like to say on to 1,000. Let's keep growing. I want to ask you a little favor. It's going to cost you nothing. Subscribe, like this video, share with your friends so you can keep up with the Dark Matter Workshop adventures. Welcome to the workshop. Hi everybody, we're going to start by making the body, the head of the monster. Short materials list. I cut an oval shape out of some beaded polystyrene, and then I used a heat gun to melt it. You can see the shape shrinking. This is the texture that it gives. Quite a bit different than when you use spray paint, but equally interesting of course. Then the next step was to glue in an eye. I poked a hole with a hobby knife, and then with a little bit of hot glue I attached a marble, which is going to represent the eye of the monster. Push it in firmly. Then I also melted a bunch of strips of beaded styrofoam, which melt into these interesting shapes, which I used to make some sort of carapace on the body. And then with a hot glue gun I sculpted the bottom jaw of the monster. These will represent the teeth and the tentacles hanging from below. The mouth was then attached to the model. And then I build up the shape of the mouth with hot glue, the sides, the bottom, till I'm happy with the results. It's important to not use a hot glue gun that's standing out for a while, because this is going to melt the glue that you've already laid down. So work fast and work with a freshly warm gun, so to speak. The teeth were attached with a little bit of hot glue. As you can tell by now, this isn't the same model with which I entered the competition, but the same principles apply for both. They are all the same creatures, but they don't look the same. This is the one I entered. The teeth are a little bit different, but it was made in the same way. Let's go on to the painting. I used a black paint-on primer, with which I painted all the hot glue and the marble. And the styrofoam was dry brushed with the primer, so you can see a whole lot of white gaps, which is what we need for when we are going to apply our next layer, which is the Tamiya clear red, which I love for blood and gore effects. Just paint the entire model with the clear red, allow it to dry, and then I attached some moisture absorbing beads. Got a little bit carried away with this model, so I added an epoxy tongue. This was made with the Green Stuff World Tentacle Maker extra large version, so you can expect a tutorial and a product review soon. So after gluing on the beads, I gave the entire model except the eye a dry brush with light flesh. Now on this particular model I didn't use as much of the dry brush color as I did with my entry. I also changed up the eye on this piece, a little bit of experimentation. I dry brushed the eye, refine it with a little bit of black paint. then a good coat of the Tamiya, covering the entire model except the teeth. Here you can see the effect on the eye a little bit. I'm going to paint in a little ball of white, but first a layer of buff on the teeth, and then a sepia wash, and the highlight again with the buff. On the original model I also added a little bit of brown wash, which makes it a little bit darker. In my head, this monster is a little bit younger, a little bit more mischievous. That's why he's sticking out his tongue before he eats your face off. So now you can see the difference between a painted on eye and an airbrushed one. The airbrushed is of course much more diffuse, but I think they both look pretty cool and pretty useful. I'm gonna finish off the model with a bit of black wash to give a little bit more depth. On the original model I also added a little bit of flesh wash on the white parts of the body, but that's it for the differences. So you basically are getting two monsters for the price of one. Of course, one of the main reasons why I make these tutorials is to inspire, to show techniques that I use so you can adapt and use them for yourself. Make your own monsters. That's it for this Death Tyrant. This is the original model, and now it's time to go to the base. First step for the basing was to cut a couple of squares out of a millimeter thick plastic cards. These are 15mm bases, so I can use them with other systems. I built these up with pieces of bark and foam board. To the foam board I glued a piece of fake fur, cut to size, and I used a mixture of PVA glue and hot glue to make sure I got a good bond between the fake fur and the foam board. Push it tightly. If you see edges that are coming off, just use a little bit of hot glue and press it. Not really a big deal anyway, as we're going to spackle the piece. I always use the stuff that you have to mix yourself, as it gives you more options for the fluidity of the product. Use the sculpting tool to get rid of all the foam board and to give a nice transition from what is going to be the sand layer and what is going to be the grass. And then after sufficient drying of the speckle, I put on some PVA and my usual sand mixture, and then it was already time for painting. I based the entire model except the grass with a black primer. Then for the grass I used mixtures of dark green and sea green by Vallejo. Sprayed it on, and then between each color that you apply, make sure to loosen the clumps of hair. For the rocks I started with a base coat of heavy charcoal, a highlight with stone grey, and then a highlight with stone grey mixed in with a little bit of white, about 70-30%. And then it's time for a bunch of washes. I washed the entire model with sepia, then with green and black wash. For the soil I did a base coat of flat earth and a highlight of beige brown, and then it was time to attach all the final details, for which I used first up a mixture of fine turf, black tea and a little bit of dried moss, and then the flowers are by Miniature, the tall grass by Bosch. Attach these with PVA and super glue. And that's it for the base work. That's it for this project. I want to thank you all very much for watching. See you soon for our next update for Dark Matter Workshop. Please, again, like, subscribe, all that jazz. See you soon. Bye.